our memory chapter. This is one of my favorite chapters. Of course, they're all my favorite, to be quite honest. They're all my favorites. But this is particularly one of my favorite chapters. This chapter specifically is one that will help you with like everyday life kind of thing. So this will help you with learning how your mind works, and that's meta memory. That in itself will help you have a better memory. And I put an old school Simon game here. I know there's other games that people use now for memory, but this is like an old school Simon where things would pop, like it would be blue, green, red, yellow, green, and you'd have to replay that. And that's really all it did. You'd have to try to get as far as you could. And they'd have Simon championships. It was a pretty popular, easy, conceptual game. So let's talk about memory. Memory is the set of processes used to encode. Let me get my handy dandy pen here. Used to encode, store, and retrieve information over different periods of time. Okay, so this is basically what memory is. Okay, encode, store, retrieve information over a certain amount of time. So super easy concept, but there is so much more going on. First with encoding. Encoding is the input of information into the memory system. So this is the input. This is the right when we see it, right when we hear it. When we hear it, that's supposed to be an ear. Okay. Right when we touch it. That kind of looks like a hand. So basically it's going to be when we sense things, when it happens, we are encoding that, okay? I'm going to fact that I can't draw at all. So we do different types of encoding. There's automatic processing. This is encoding of detail like time, space, frequency, and the meaning of words. Usually takes place without any conscious awareness. It just happens, okay? But then there's effortful processing. This is encoding that requires work. For example, studying, okay? Material is far better encoded when it's meaningful to you, but it doesn't have to be. You know, people say you can't remember stuff unless it means something to you. Well, it doesn't have to be specifically meaningful. For example, people will tell me history class, you know, they're like, I hate history or I hate math. And it's like, don't hate, because like those are really good subjects, because, you know, we learn about history, we cannot repeat it, you know, kind of thing, or knowing our history helps us grow and be better people. So, I mean, history is good. So if you can make the history kind of apply to yourself, it'll be a little easier to remember. But I can apply Pearl Harbor to the fact that my dad was in the military, perhaps, so that I can remember the date of Pearl Harbor is December 7th, 1941, I believe. If I am wrong, please someone feel free to correct me. But I know it's December 7th. So history, if applied to self, yes, you could probably remember it a little bit better, but you don't have to. You can still learn stuff and encode things, even if it's not something that really pertains to you, kind of thing. So types of encoding. You have visual, which is obviously seeing. Okay. Then you have acoustic, which is hearing. And then you have semantic, which is meaning. Okay, so this one, I always like to put a thought bubble with this one, because if you think about it, what you think matters when you start talking about understanding and encoding information. So if somebody says to you, hey, you want to go out and have a good time tonight? All right, there's some semantic encoding there. You want to have a good time? Now, good time often implies, especially said with that inflection, it's implying that, you know, some nefarious activities are going to go on. But if you don't know the meaning of let's go have a good time, you want to have a good time, if you don't really know that meaning, then you're not going to be able to encode that information properly. If somebody says, especially like in the drug culture with kids, or with kids in general, somebody had asked my daughter, did she want to, what was it they said? Oh, I forgot what they said to her, but it was a drug reference, kind of like go back to the 60s. You want to go take a bump. Well, that's cocaine, bump of cocaine. Well, if you don't know what bump means, then you have no idea what you're signing up for, okay? So the meaning of the words matter. And that's, you can't encode information properly if you don't know the meaning of the words. That's why it's really important if you're reading like a journal article, or if you're reading a textbook and you come across a word and you're like, I have no idea what that word means. Look it up. Just real quick, take a second, look it up, go back. Because that one word could really frame the entire meaning of everything that you're reading. I know now. I know what that means now. So yeah, so basically, semantic coding is the meaning of the words, a meaning of the event. Self-reference effect. The self-reference effect is a tendency for an individual to have better memory for information that relates to oneself in comparison to memory that has less personal relevance. Now, we just kind of know that this is true, okay? We do have, when we can self-reference, our memory is a little stronger. But as we'll talk about later, it might not be as good when we self-reference, but we'll get back to that. Semantic coding involves deeper level of processing than visual or acoustic. So obviously, because you've got to know the meanings. Acoustic encoding, people are a little bit better with acoustic than necessarily visual. I had somebody one tell me they were a visual learner, so they couldn't just read something. And I explained to them, reading is visual. So I said, you might actually be that you're lean more towards acoustic encoding as your style that you're stronger in, because when you are watching the film and you're hearing what they're saying, but you're also reading it, that's visual. So it may be that the acoustic is what is helping you. Watching a film, that's going to be acoustic learning, unless it's specifically visual what you're learning on the film. But the truth is, everyone learns pretty much, when we start talking about the learning styles, everyone is pretty much equal in all of the learning styles. And you may learn towards something because it's a preference, lean towards something because it's a preference, or it's how you were raised, or it's how you've always done it. Like, I am very acoustic encoding. I'm very much hearing. But if I hear someone's name and I see their name on a name tag, I'm going to remember it. But if I just hear your name, or if I just see your name, and I don't say it a few times, I'm not going to remember it. And that's pretty much how everybody is. Craik and Tulving concluded that we process verbal information best through semantic coding, especially if we apply self-reference. So obviously, of course, we're going to encode it. Verbal information is going to be encoded best if we know the meaning of what is being said. Next is when we talked about encoding, storage. We talked about, let's go back, encoding, storing, and retrieval. Well, one really popular model of storage is the Atkins-Shiffrin model, okay? This is where they really get into what storage means. This is creation of a permanent record of information. They believe that it starts with sensory, moves to short-term, and then long-term. Your sensory memory is going to be your very brief memory for events. So this is the now. Okay, this is brief. And that's your sensory memory. So it may be, you see somebody walking along and you go, oh, that's a nice bracelet. And then when you get to the store, next door, you're like, oh, I was going to tell you something about this person I saw. I can't remember what it was. I remember the person, like I can see him walking towards me. I can't remember what it was. Or you walk by a store and you're like, ooh, I really want that. I totally got to tell my friend that I want that bag. And then you get to your friend and you're like, oh my gosh, I had to tell you something about this store, but I can't remember what it is. That's because your short-term memory is very brief, okay? It's a brief storage of sensory events. Your sensory memory. It's super brief. If you don't rehearse it and kick it into short-term and then practice it, you will not remember it, okay? So your short-term memory then kicks in. Let's say that you want to remember to take you're like, okay, I got to remember about this bag. Oh, writing with the mouse. You want to remember to tell your friend about this bag, so you keep reminding yourself, okay, I got to tell my friend about this bag, or you jot it down on a piece of paper so you can look at it later, but you keep remembering, okay, I got to tell my friend about this bag. when you get to your friend, because you've been rehearsing it, you will remember it. But after you tell your friend about the bag, you're not going to practice anymore. Okay? You're probably just going to let it go. But if you leave the place going, man, that bag, I'm telling you, and then you tell your parent about it or your friend, man, I saw this bag. It was so nice. It had little buttons on it. And a lot of the times you'll even add stuff in there to the short-term memory while you're practicing it. It can become long-term memory. You may even remember 30 years later, oh, I remember when I was 14 years old and I wanted this bag and I couldn't get it, but it was amazing, right? So, but your sensory memory is very brief. That's seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling something. And then unless you kick it to your short-term memory, okay, I'm going to intentionally focus on this because so much is going on. Your sensory memory can only pick up so much. If you kick it over to short-term because it might be important, keep it there a little while. George Miller proposed we can remember 7 to 12 items at a time, but you can be primed. We'll talk about that in a second. Then you go to long-term memory. This is continuous storage, okay? You have different types of long-term memory. You have explicit and implicit. Your explicit is your declarative memories. These are memories we consistently recall. Semantic is your basic knowledge, history, things like that. Episodic is your personal information. Your birthday, your favorite color, personal information. Then you have implicit memories. These are procedural memories. This is how to do things. Like, how do you make a peanut butter jelly sandwich? You don't have to go through all the lists just to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich. You got that. It's implicit. In fact, it's primed. Okay, how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich is primed. Your multiplication tables. Multiplication tables. If I say to one of you, 3 times 7 equals... Some of you are like 21. I had somebody 21 typing it out. 21. All right. 9 times 3 equals 27. Somebody kicks it out real fast, right? 8 times 7 equals a little slower, 56. Okay. So these are our multiplication tables. We are primed for these. When people tell me they're not good at math, I always ask them, do you know your multiplication tables? And they're like, no. And I'm like, that's why you're slower at math. It's not that you're not good at it. It's that when you get a problem that's like 2, to the third power plus 6 divided by 42, 42 divided by 6. 42 divided by 6 minus 10 equals. You get a problem like this, it's going to take you longer because you can't just jump in and be like, okay, well, 6 times 7, or 6 into 42, boom, that's going to be easy 7, right? You can't just jump in there like that. Parentheses first. 2 times 3. When you got 2 times 3, hold on just a second. I'm sorry. Okay, so it's working. All right, so 7. So 2 to the third power, 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. I hope I'm doing this right, or I'll look really bad. 8 plus, that's in the not, it's not parentheses anymore. 8 plus 7 is... Unless we're supposed to multiply it. What am I doing here? I made this too complicated for myself. 8 plus 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, minus 10. All right, so that's going to be equal to... Wait for answers. Nobody wants to do it. 8 plus 7, minus 10, 5. All right, 15, minus 5. I'm assuming that's the right way to do that. But I probably did it wrong. It has been so long since I've done a problem like that. I'm actually going to write this down. Oops, 2 to the third power, and I'm going to check it later. Because I'm laughing at myself because I probably actually just did that wrong. Divided by 6 minus 10 equals. I'm totally going to keep that for later. Anyways, you get my point, okay? So my point is, if you know your multiplications, if I say, 21 divided by 7 is, you're going to be able to pop 3 out really quick. And that's being primed. That's being primed for something. If you say to me, what is Piaget's stages of cognitive development, I can just throw those out to you. I'm not having to dig them up from long term. They're things that are primed in my brain. I can just come up with them like right away. They're just there. They're committed to memory, and I'm primed. So if I take a test, so if I'm going to learn more about Piaget, I'm just adding it to what I already know. So I can create a network. And that's what's good about being primed for something. All right. The model of human memory is based on the belief that we process memories in the same way that a computer processes information. Okay? So it's kind of like that. We process it in the same way that a computer processes information. So is that really what's going on? Is that really how we do it? Kind of, yes. Like everyone the research that's been out there, it says the brain can be trained to do things in a certain way. And if you know how those tricks of the trade, you can definitely improve brain functioning. So, all right. And this is a handy dandy picture of, this is a handy dandy picture of that Atkins-Shiffrin model. All right, hold on just a second. All right, so the 3 ways that we that we retrieve information: recall, recognition, and relearning. Recall is access information without a cue. So that's kind of like if somebody says, hey, what movie did we watch? I mean, that's a cue because they're saying movie, but no other information. If I were to say to you, what was on your last exam? I'm not giving you any cues. It's complete recall. Next is recognition. This is identifying information previously learned after encountering it again. A comparison. This is the easier type of way to retrieve information. So, for example, you may, if you're doing recall, if somebody says, what did you do on your 2nd grade birthday party? And you're like, I have no idea what I did for my 2nd grade birthday party. Well, recall may be hard, but if you're given pictures, now you can identify information, previously that you kind of learned. So then the next time someone asks you, those cues will be there. So you'll have those cues. So it's just recognizing something. Multiple choice is recognition. You've learned Atkins-Shiffrin model. So if it says, which one of these terms is not part of the Atkins-Shiffrin model? And your choice is sensory memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, or semantic memory. All right. Semantic memory is not part of the Atkins-Shiffrin model in that what we're learning. Later stages, well, I guess it is part of the Atkins-Shiffrin model, to be quite frank, because it is a long-term. But how about this? Which one is not part of the Atkins-Shiffrin model? Sensory memory, long-term memory, chunking, or short-term memory. All right? Even though you saw chunking, chunking is not associated with the Atkins-Shiffrin model. Okay? Semantic memory technically is. So, relearning. Learning information you previously learned. So, like after you study, going back and kind of reviewing what you studied is a really powerful tool because that can help you tremendously when it comes to learning the information. So Bradley and Hitch proposed that storing short-term memories is like opening different files on a computer. The type of short-term memory depends on the type of information received, stored. There's 3 short-term memory systems. You have your visual sketch pad, which obviously is visual. Your episodic buffer, what the episode, like what what it is about, okay? And then the phonological loop, so the sound that goes with it, the sound that goes in with it. All right, so basically you have your semantic, visual, and hearing. So, but you have your, visual, personal to you, so but it'd still be semantic because it's the episode, it's how it's involved, and then audible. So, all right, so Carl Ashley Carl Ashley explored the problem where memories and are stored in the brain. Okay, so where are they exactly? So if I have your brain here, can I go in and tap this part right here and pull out a memory that you're unable to get to? If I electrically stimulate that part of the brain? Well, we have found that when we electrically stimulate certain parts of the brain, people will have flashes or taste things or think things. So we know there's parts of the brain that do store memory. We know that the hippocampus is hardcore involved in memory. We'll learn about that in a minute. With the engrams, this is groups of neurons that serve to physically represent memory, but there's no evidence for engrams yet, and I say yet because they're still looking. This is a field, a territory that is still, it's constantly emerging and changing, everything we're learning about the brain. I mean, when you know how we find out, we found out, we found out Pluto wasn't really a planet. Well, it's kind of what we do with the brain. We're like, yeah, well, no, actually, that's not how it works. We were wrong. Okay, let's investigate something different. So we're still looking into things. We're still hypothesizing. The equipotentiality hypothesis is that if one area of the brain is involved in memory is damaged, the other part of the area will take over that memory function. The only problem is that we have seen individuals when certain parts of their brain are damaged, memory function is not taken over by any other parts of the brain. Or certain parts of the brain are damaged, certain memories are lost, and they are unable to get back to those memories. So, can this happen? Yes, we do see that individuals that have memory damage, that have brain damage, are able to have memory functioning after a few months healing, things like that. They do get back some memory functioning, and it is that we can see perhaps that it is shifting. But we don't know for sure. That's why it's a hypothesis. We're still kind of investigating. We're still investigating. All right, so the brain and memory. First of all, the amygdala. This relates emotions such as fear and aggression, and it facilitates encoding emotional memories into a deeper level. So things like flashbulb memories, which we'll talk about, these are kind of stored and run through the amygdala. Facial recognition, which we learned in the biology chapter, facial recognition is a big part of memory, of the amygdala. It's kind of one of the things that the amygdala does. The hippocampus, I like to say that elephants have good memories, but the hippo never forgets. So this is involved in recognition memory and spatial memory. Damage leads to problems, severe problems. Go ahead and Google, YouTube, Clive Waring, man with 30-second memory. There's some really, really, really good clips out there that, usually I show in class, but instead I just put it on the PowerPoint. So go ahead and YouTube that, and because it's a really cool clip. He literally has 8 seconds. You ask him a question, what did you have for breakfast today? While he's thinking of the answer, he's literally forgetting the question. So he has a very, very short memory. Cerebellum. This is involved in creating implicit memories. The cerebellum, remember the cerebellum is also called the little brain. Balance. We learned about that in bio. Neurotransmitters. These are likely to be crucial in memory consolidation, but for general psychology, that's pretty much what we learn. There's a lot of broken down with regards to neurotransmission importance. One of the things we find extremely important too is norepinephrine is very important. Acetylcholine is very important for memory. Also, sleep is extremely important for memory because we believe that from what we've seen from MRIs and sleep studies is that when we are sleeping, the brain is cleaning it. It's doing kind of like a flushing or a cleaning. So, important stuff. All right, so forever memories. So arousal theory says that strong emotions trigger formation of strong memories. And weaker emotional experiences, weaker memories. Partly because of stress hormones. Now, flashbulb memories. These are exceptionally clear recollection of an important event. Like my flashbulb memory, I lost my daughter literally in my arms, and when the EMS got there, they brought her back to me. She had a status seizure that just went for too long, and she got respiratory, got caught up. I'd called an ambulance; they were on the way, and when they got there, they were able to revive her. So I remember every single tiny little detail of that, obviously. And 9/11 attacks, Kennedy assassination, death of FDR, stock market crash. 9/11, when I first started teaching, 9/11 was the big flashbulb memory example because everyone I was teaching remembered where they were. But now, guess what? I got 16-year-olds I got 16 to 19-year-olds who, this is history to them. I mean, if you are 19 or younger, this is history to you. This is something that, you were 1 year old when this happened, 1 or 2. So maybe a 3-year-old might remember, but anything younger than 3, and we'll learn about that later in another chapter with development, but anything younger than 3, you're not going to remember it. So this is history to you. Kennedy assassination is history to me. Death of FDR is history. Stock market crash of back in the day is history to me. But for people that were around when 9/11 happened or Kennedy assassination, they can tell you what they were wearing, what the air smelled like, where they were, every little detail, because it was kind of ingrained. Plus, it was rehearsed a good bit. A lot of times when a car accident or there's traumas that happen, or your wedding day or your child's first steps, you rehearse that. So you see your child take their first steps, and you're like, you call Grammy, you're like, Grammy, Ashley took her first steps. You call her dad. Hey, Dad, Ashley took her first steps. Oh my gosh, it was so cute. She pulled herself up on the counter and she was like, walk, walk, walk. You know what I mean? Like, you call people and you rehearse that. And that's quite often what happens with traumatic events, as well as things that are like nationwide. We remember them because we rehearse them, but also because of stress hormones that are involved, and it makes the memory stronger. So problems with memory. Amnesia. This is a loss of long-term memory that occurs as a result of disease, physical trauma, or psychological trauma. Anterograde amnesia. This cannot remember new information, although you can remember information prior. So no new, okay? Antero, no new. So you get into a car accident, and you can remember who you are, you can remember everything about your past, but you're unable to remember things that are currently happening. So like your child, may come in, and then 2 years down the way they come in and you don't recognize them because they're 2 years older than what you remember them being. So usually this is one that you can see a great deal of a good prognosis for. But if there's damage to the hippocampus and new memories can't be formed, this is a very hard way to live. Person would have to do a lot of note taking and memory work of different ways to have to think to function. Retrograde amnesia. Retrograde amnesia is the loss of memory for events prior to the trauma. No. Okay. Sorry, I had a puppy. All right. So retrograde amnesia. This is loss of memory for events prior to the trauma. So prior. So we get in an accident. We can remember future things, but we can't remember our family, our friends, where we worked. Now, here's the thing, though. A lot of the time, stuff that we're primed for, like somebody may have lost their memory, but when you put a stable, you give them access to building tools, and all of a sudden they're building this awesome project because maybe they were in construction prior, because that information was primed. It was in the processing memory. I mean, they just know. It's just there. It's been primed for them. It's something they don't have to have to have access to know how to continue to do. This is why when we see some really bad cases of retrograde amnesia as well, the person isn't able to remember anything about themselves, who they are, where they're from. They can't remember even sometimes simple tasks, but you sit them down at a piano and they're able to play fully through a piano. All right, memory as construction and reconstruction. Construction, this is formation of new memories. Reconstruction is the building of process of bringing up old memories. Quite often in reconstruction, this is where we have our problems. We don't reconstruct things properly. Effects of misinformation from external sources that lead to the creation of false memory. Suggestibility is quite easy to do. If you say to somebody, I really love that purple dress you were wearing on Thursday, and they say, no, it was a yellow dress. And you say, oh, well, I know that Amber was wearing a yellow dress, and let's say that Amber was wearing yellow. And they go, oh yeah, she was. So yeah, you were in purple. Did you forget you were wearing a purple dress? Oh, I totally forgot. It's not that hard for suggestibility when you weave in truth with the little lies. And sometimes we do it quite accidentally. We will reconstruct a memory to kind of fit how our stereotypes or our belief system is. So not necessarily belief system, but even stereotypes that we don't even know we have. Like, so we end up reconstructing this memory that isn't accurate. Misinformation effect paradigm. This is after exposure to incorrect information, a person may misremember the original event. So even if they don't use that incorrect information, you say, oh my gosh, did you see those bunnies popping through the park? They were so cute. And somebody goes, they weren't bunnies, they were foxes. They weren't foxes. Oh, maybe they were beavers, or not beavers, but whatever other creatures, small and crawly. Maybe they were oh yeah, you're right. I think that might have been what it was. So if you put that doubt in there, once the exposure to that incorrect information is there, the original information gets muddy, okay? False memory syndrome is recall of false autobiographical memory, and often we would see this with repressed and recovered memories. So you have to be very careful when you're leading someone through a repressed or recovered memory process, simply because it's very easy to suggest or to end up having the person recreate or reconstruct a memory that just isn't true. So you've got to be careful with that. And for this, by the way, Elizabeth Elizabeth Loftus, Loftes. If you Google Elizabeth Loftus, I think actually it might be a U, but Elizabeth Loftus, and you can even type TEDx. She's got a TEDx that's amazing. Like, it's just an amazing TEDx. Elizabeth Loftus. It's a TEDx on memory, false memory, and memory reconstruction. So if you want to know anything about memory, look up Elizabeth Loftus. Her work is phenomenal. All right, forgetting. So forgetting is just a loss of information from long-term memory. Sometimes there's an encoding failure. Well, it was never put there. This is quite often what happens during an exam. It's like, oh, why don't I know this stuff? I studied it. Well, you read it once, but it was never truly encoded. All right, transient. This is memories can fade over time if their unused information fades. A great example of this is people that learned Spanish. They learned Spanish long ago, and they've not used it. It kind of started to fade away. But after a great deal of work, they can kind of pull it back, and it can kind of start coming back to them. But it would fade over time, and you may even lose a lot of things that weren't well primed. Ebbinghaus and the forgetting curve. This is a steep incline. Do I have a picture of it? No. All right. So basically, you can look at it in your textbook. But Ebbinghaus, you have 100 terms that you're remembering. Okay. Within a few seconds, it is on rapid decline. By 30 seconds, you've lost all 100 terms. All right, absent-mindedness is another thing. This memory and error breaks because the attention focus is being somewhere else. This is why people that suffer from depression sometimes will forget to do things. They'll forget prospective. So with prospective memory, they'll forget to do stuff because they're distracted by the depression. All right, blocking, you can't access the information. It's just not there. Tip of the tongue information. Tip of the tongue. It may be because you did TOT. It may be because it wasn't properly embedded, or it may be because you just can't access the information. It is somehow blocked. Why it's blocked, we don't know. It's just somehow blocked. Tip of the tongue phenomenon, as you guys know, for most of you use this for your discussion, but tip of the tongue phenomenon is when an individual, it's just right there. It's like, who's that actress name that's got the hair and the eyes and the nails? Oh, God, I can't remember. It's just like right there on the tip of the tongue. So, misattribution. This is you confuse the source of your information. It's also a distortion of memory. We already talked about suggestibility, similar to misattribution, planning false memories. Bias. This is feelings or views of the world distort memory. So if you have a bias towards someone, like for example, if a group of kids of 16-year-olds come walking into Starbucks back in the day, they come walking into Starbucks, my friend rolled her eyes. She was like, ugh, they're going to be so loud and obnoxious. That's her bias, okay? I know plenty of kids that are 16 that they are not loud and obnoxious. But you know what? I know a lot of 65-year-old women, 75-year-old women in these little red hat clubs. They'll come in and they are loud, all right? But their bias is towards 16-year-olds. The 16-year-old's going to be loud, so after they leave, they'll be, ugh, they were so obnoxious. Were they really actually obnoxious, or were there just 2 times that they laughed all together and you noticed it, so you automatically assume that they're obnoxious? So your bias of the world can actually contribute to creating misattribution and false memory through the suggestibility of your own bias. So you got to be careful with that. Persistence. This is interference of current information, making it harder to concentrate on other things. For example, if the Muppet song, Phenomenon, do-do-do-do-do, Phenomenon, do-do-do-do. So we were doing a game, and somebody started going, Phenomenon, and somebody else was like, do-do-do-do-do. And I'm trying to concentrate on, like, focus and move and do certain things. And I was like, you guys got to stop, man. Like, you guys are good at this. You have automatic. You know what to do. I, on the other hand, am trying to figure out what buttons to press. So I need you guys to clear comms. Just clear comms. So it was hilarious, though. It was funny. But, all right, next, other interference, different types of interference. Interference is information is stored in our memory, but it's inaccessible for some reason, inaccessible. You have proactive interference. This is old information hindering recall of new. So the old is hindering, old stops new. All right, old information hinders recall of new information. So let's say you learned German a long time ago, and now you're trying to learn Swedish, which actually would be Dutch. Trying to learn Dutch, and you're having a really hard time. You're having a really hard time learning Dutch because the German keeps popping up. This happens a lot with Spanish and French. So retroactive interference is information learned more recently hinders recall of old. And again, this would be, for example, you already know your old information, your new stops old. Okay? So your Dutch that you're now learning, you're learning this Dutch, and then you go home and you're around your German family or your German friends, and you're like, nope, I can't speak it. Like, I've forgotten most of it because my Dutch is getting in the way. Because I don't even know if they're similar. I don't speak German or Dutch. But Spanish and French, the Romance languages, and French and Italian, Italian, these are all very similar. My friend Juliette speaks all 3. French is her native language. So when she's speaking to Marco, her partner, she's speaking French-Italian mix, And it is very hard for me to try to keep up with what they are saying. A, because I don't speak French or Italian, but B, even trying to figure out what French or Italian, what they're speaking. So, all right. So that's that. Proactive, old stops new. Retro, new stops old. Oops, wait. Memory enhancing, ways to enhance your memory. Goes short-term to long-term memory. First of all, rehearsal. This is just conscious repetition. Next is chunking. So instead of going, I have to remember all of Freud, Skinner, and Piaget. I'm going to memorize all of this right now, and I'm going to study all of it right now. Instead, you study Freud on Monday, then maybe on Tuesday you study some Skinner, and you review a little Freud, okay, and then maybe on, let's just say Tuesday, and that should say Skinner. And then maybe on Wednesday, you study a little Piaget, and you review some Skinner and some Freud, review. And then on Thursday, you go back to Freud. You do some deep studying with Freud, but you go ahead and review your Piaget and your Skinner. And then on Friday, you go and you study your Skinner again, and you review your Piaget and your Freud. And then lastly, on Saturday, you study your Piaget again, and you review your Freud and your Skinner. Doing a rotation like this is going to help you tremendously to learn your material, especially if some of the stuff is really important for later nursing. You're going to see this on exams for nursing and for business. In fact, some businesses give exams for give like application exams, and Maslow hierarchy of needs is quite often on it. So if I say 5, 4, 3, 6, 8, 2, 9, 0, 3, go, and I ask you to say that back, it's going to be a lot harder than if I say 5, 4, 3, 6, 8, 2, 9, 0, 3. You're going to be able to repeat that back better. Elaborative rehearsal, this just is thinking about meaning of new information and its relation to stored information. So this is kind of elaborating on it. You know, how did 9/11 affect my life? What was involved in 9/11? When was Pearl Harbor, and who were some of the soldiers that were there? Like, kind of giving it meaning to new information, that can help you. That's elaborative rehearsal. Or even just tying it to other information you've learned. Next is mnemonics. Remember SAME? You got to know this for nursing, for all medical fields, actually. We'll test you in this. But sensory, when you have your sensory neurons, they're your afferent, and your motor neurons are your efferent. So sensory, afferent, motor, efferent. So it's a good way to remember that. And EGBD, every good boy does fine. So, or every good, even, great, I don't remember the other ones, because I learned every good boy does fine. That's the notes on piano or guitar, but it's on here. If we look at this guy here, I don't draw that very well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this E, every good boy does fine, helps you remember the piano notes. And in between here, it's F-A-C-E. F-A-C-E, face. All right, writing with a pen, y'all, or with a mouse, so please forgive me. So effective studying, best way to do it again is to chunk information into little bits, use elaborative rehearsal, get into your long-term memory, apply self-reference, make it meaningful, especially psychology. Oh my gosh, the learning chapter. I mean, I want you guys to walk away knowing operant conditioning. It's very important. Operant conditioning is so important to our lives. Overlearning, this is preventing storage, prep day before, do not cram, and then continue to prep, like continue your learning. Rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. Don't cram, space it out. And that's it for the memory chapter. And of course, this gets way deeper, by the way. Like, it gets so super deeper. But that's all we learn in general psych. Remember, if you have any questions, we're going to do a little question section after this. But email me also, and I can help you. Thank you guys so much.